We have with us Bart Edes, representative for North America to the Asian Development Bank. We're going to have a little conversation with him about his work, and he's going to offer us some insights about what it is to align with the Asian Development Bank and the work it's doing in Asia. Canadian professionals in international development, many of us are working there, and many of us would like to. So this is if you're wanting to sort of find out more, stick with us for this conversation. Bart, tell us a bit about your role as a North American rep for the ADB.
Phil, great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to share some insights from the Asian Development Bank with the CAIDP community. So for your members who don't necessarily know about ADB, we're one of the traditional regional development banks in the larger family of multilateral development banks. We've been working now for 52 years out of a headquarters in the Philippines, providing loans and technical assistance, capacity development, and advice to developing countries in the world's largest and most populous region. And we have been increasing the support that we're providing through loans, grants, and other forms of financing over the last few years. And we have an office in Washington, D.C., our North American representative office. And although based in the States, the role of the office is to maintain relations and to provide support and engagement with stakeholders in Canada as well as the U.S. First and foremost, we're interacting with our shareholders. So ADB, like the other multilateral development banks, is owned by governments. We have 67 members, and the U.S. and Canada together own 1/5 of ADB shares. So very important constituency. And so for that reason, 2 decades ago, we set up an office on the continent. And a lot of what I'm doing is outreach such as this, sharing information with different groups, and today with development consultants, looking for opportunities that we could benefit from collaboration together.
Let's talk about that a bit. Can you give us an idea of the range of assignments that Canadian professionals are already taking on with the ADB?
Well, Canadian companies and individual consultants have been working with ADB for decades now, and some of them may be providing physical inputs, goods. Think of the concrete and steel and machinery that's required for a lot of projects that ADB finances. But I think the area where Canadian firms have had, and individuals have had more success, is for consulting assignments. And so this is where brain power, expertise, analysis skills, sectoral knowledge is of particular use. We've worked with a range of companies with background in engineering, in energy, in education, in water and sanitation. And not only private consultancies, you also have universities having won contracts with ADB and NGOs. So when we think of consultants, it's not just those who are operating privately, whether individually or for a company. Other entities, nonprofit entities, for example, can get contracts with ADB. And the opportunities will be growing, actually, because for a couple of reasons. One, our lending is growing, the number of projects we're doing is growing, so there'll be more opportunities that way. In addition, we recently changed our policies on procurement and consulting to put more emphasis on value for money and on quality. And here in Canada, I think that'll provide an edge or increased opportunities for Canadian firms.
Thinking sort of sectorally across the various sectors, are there any particular areas where say, the demand for consultant expertise is greater at this time?
I'd say look to our new long-term strategy. So last year, our member countries approved Strategy 2030, highlighting where ADB is going to be working with its developing member countries. And among the areas where we're expected to ramp up our operations are in climate change, in environment, disaster risk reduction, in gender equality. Of course, we're going to be in traditional areas where ADB has long-standing strengths and where the bulk of our investment portfolio is. And so I point here to transport, energy, water and sanitation, urban development. But I should also add that we're giving more emphasis under this new strategy to knowledge. So we're going to be drawing upon consultants to help us with studies, with research in the project context and more generally. So these are just some of the areas where I see positive developments that create a new space for collaboration.
So I'm a CAIDP member, and I'm part of a firm that has maybe 10, 15 people, and I'm pretty typical of a CAIDP member. Not a large firm, although we do have large firms as members. What would a smallish firm like ours do? How would we go about getting ourselves ready to be competitive with the ADB, to be a competitive bidder?
Phil, it can be a little intimidating for those who haven't dealt with the ADB before or have limited engagement with the multilateral development banks, small firms, individuals. How do we approach this big bureaucracy? And fortunately, there is help, and there are resources to help companies put their best foot forward and to increase their chances of eventually winning a contract. First and foremost, it's a matter of doing homework, as you would for the pursuit of business from any source, including, say, the Canadian government. So find out about ADB activities in the area of expertise of your firm. We are very transparent. In the last 15 years or so, we've enhanced considerably our disclosure of information at early stages of project development and when consulting and procurement assignments become available. So specifically, read our long-term strategy, which isn't that long, to get an idea of where are the areas that we're putting emphasis on. If you have countries that you want to focus on, and that's often a good idea, read our country partnership strategy for that country. We develop these in collaboration with the country every 3 to 5 years. And then every year, we develop something we call our Country Operations Business Plan, or COBP. This basically explains how we're implementing this strategy, which is demand-driven and agreed to with the government. So by reviewing these documents, a company like the one you described would have a pretty good idea of where ADB is going in general, more specifically at the country level, and importantly within the country, what are the sectors and thematic areas where we're concentrating our efforts. While ADB works in many areas, it doesn't do everything in every country. And this is, again, spelled out in the country partnership strategy. So I say start there, do your homework. Of course, it's more than just knowing what ADB is doing. It's good to know what are the key government agencies, ministries involved in the sector area where your firm has an interest. Establishing relationships is important for finding out information, but also making a company known. We can say more about that in a bit.
Perhaps now we could just say a little bit more about what it is to establish a relationship with the ADB. Do we come and talk to you, or should we be making contact with the various ADB offices? How do we do that?
All of the above, Phil. And I mentioned earlier that there are resources available to companies, many of them public resources. So, for example, we're talking today in Calgary, in Alberta, and Alberta supports its companies looking for opportunities abroad, exporting and seeking contracts with the international financial institutions. The Government of Canada has a Trade Commissioners program. And as far as myself, part of the role that I have in my small team in North America is to provide information, advice to companies and individuals interested in contracts and how they go about that. And I'm available also to not only provide such information, but to link consultants to sources for more information within ADB and within countries. I'd also mention that our website has a considerable amount of insight into developments, economic and social and sectoral developments in countries. So it may not be the first place one thinks of to learn what's happening in a country, but in these country partnership strategies, we do an analysis of the country context. Separate from that, we do sectoral studies that might be focused on a particular country, a sub-region, or Asia in general. In short, there's a wealth of resources there to help companies get a better understanding of what's happening. One of the important things is for a company to get known, to build the brand. Because as you imagine, there are lots of consultants, not only Canadian, but from our many other member countries seeking contracts. And you do have to be a national or firm registered in one of ADB's 67 members. Of course, Canada, founding member, that's easy, an easy criterion to meet. But beyond that, how will you make yourself known? Simple things, marketing, communications, having a good website that's kept up to date and that's dynamic, presence on social media such as LinkedIn, perhaps Twitter as well. Among the knowledge sharing features of ADB's website is a subsite we call Development Asia. You can just type in development.asia into your browser and you'll come to a site where we share practical solutions to real development problems in Asia and the Pacific. And we're soliciting content from experienced development practitioners, my colleagues within ADB who have been involved in projects, governments that also wish to share, but also private consultants who have been involved in projects and may have seen how in water and energy and education, different approaches, techniques, innovations, how they've improved lives and made a difference. And we welcome these examples and can, in a structured format on Development Asia, share this content. So it's an opportunity for an individual or private consultancy to share their expertise and to show what they know and what they've accomplished. And that's just another way of building a brand. Beyond that, just one more word on the topic, trying to meet with ADB staff. So I'm a starting point in North America, but if one gets to Asia, meet with ADB staff and our resident missions, which tend to be in the capital cities, or even better, at our headquarters, where we have the largest grouping of our staff and sectoral and thematic and country specialists. It's easy to arrange meetings. That can be done through me. It can also be done through Canada's executive director, who represents Canada on the board of directors at ADB. Also the trade commissioner for the Canadian government. So the point is there's many different channels that one can pursue and assistance one can draw upon to make these connections, to hold meetings, to for example, have a presentation if one makes it to ADB headquarters, to hold a brown bag, to share some experience of the firm. And these are great ways to to do some marketing and make yourself known and distinguish yourself from other companies.
Is there a registration process for a firm wanting to work with the ADB?
Yeah, as I mentioned, consultancy really is the space, as opposed to providing major physical inputs, the space where Canada really thrives and where there's great potential for Canadian firms to do more business with ADB. And so we have our consultant management system, or CMS as we call it, very easy to find on our website. You basically enter your firm's CV, if you will, highlighting your expertise and work that you've done. And this is important both for bidding on contracts. You'll have to have a file, but more generally, ADB staff refer to the CMS from time to time when they're trying to get an idea of what consultancies have registered and have expertise for an assignment that I may be thinking about in a few months or next year for a project that's being developed.
So, but some of us in CAIDP are not part of a firm really at all. We're sole proprietors. We're specialists in a particular area that may or may not be of interest to the ADB, but if we want to find out, if we want to learn and position ourselves to work for the ADB as an individual, any different advice from what you've just given us?
I wouldn't say different, maybe complementary advice. And that's to, again, utilizing the resources at your disposal on ADB's website. Find out who's been winning the contracts. So every time we have a procurement or consulting contract, we go through a process of engagement. The winner is cited on the website. And an individual consultant looking at future opportunities, depending on the specifics of the opportunity, may find it useful to team up with a proven successful enterprise that has a procurement or consulting contract. So this is part of the bigger recommendation of making local contacts and finding partners in country where you might want to work, but also internationally. So in your network, which is filled with seasoned development practitioners with global experience. I can see opportunities of individual consultants teaming up with one firm, coming together and working with one firm to make a stronger application. Because in the course of applying for consultancy, on the ADB side and on the government side, where for contracts to the government, the executing agency is actually the giver of the contract, they'll be looking closely at technical skills and CVs. And so by drawing upon expertise in different quarters, individuals that will bring something to a particular assignment and meet the terms of reference, this can be quite important to the chances of success.
So that sort of begs the question, how might an individual go about finding out who else is out there who has done work for the ADB?
Yeah.
And obviously you could put a question out to the CAIDP network, but
Right.
is there any way of finding that out through the ADB direct?
Yes, so a couple of ways I'd suggest. Again, going to the website and seeing who's won contracts over time, that's one thing. So you can see who are the players, and what have they done. You can also go to LinkedIn, where we have a consultants network. And through that, there are a lot of consultants, a subset of which are Canadian consultants who have experience with ADB. So those are just off the top of my head, 2 suggestions. A third one would be to go to the Canadian Trade Commissioner in Manila or here in Canada, who has some insights on Canadian individuals and firms that have had success in the last few years dealing with ADB, or have had success at other development banks, giving them experience that could be quite useful in making a bid for an ADB project.
Great. At the beginning of our conversation, you talked about ADB strategy, and obviously everything falls out from the strategy in terms of how you procure consultant support and so on. Could you just say a little bit about what's hot, for the ADB? What are you putting focus on in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Right. So this new strategy of ADB's is aligned to global agreements, the Sustainable Development Goals, which basically set the world's agenda for development in a variety of areas, the Paris Climate Agreement, the Sendai Agreement, a framework actually on disaster risk reduction. So we are aligning our work to these major agreements, and the areas we're going to be concentrating on, in addition to infrastructure, which is traditionally been our bread and butter, we're doing more work in health and education. This won't be a majority of our work, but this is an area that we've sought to develop. And I mention it because there are a number of Canadian individual consultants and consulting firms that have expertise in the space of education, for example, technical and vocational education, skills development, capacity development. So there'll be opportunities certainly in this space, in the province of Alberta, where there's a lot of strength in the energy space, those working on clean tech. We have a major commitment as an institution to addressing climate change through mitigation and adaptation. In fact, we intend to finance $80 billion worth of projects between 2019 and 2030. So I would say watch that space. And it's not, in addressing climate change, we're not only working on energy, like renewable energy projects, but flood protection, for example, on more sustainable transport that reduces emissions. So look there for emerging opportunities as we increase our financing overall. Climate change will be one space we do it in. And for those of your members who are working on the social side of things and maybe have expertise on gender equality, gender mainstreaming, we are doing more work on this and have more ambitious targets under our long-term strategy. And these are projects, usually they're not specifically dedicated to promoting gender equality, but will be based within another sector, whether it be education or finance or energy or somewhere else, trying to ensure that we are maximizing opportunities to address gaps between men and women and boys and girls, and empowering women. So from that angle, for the subset of your membership working with expertise on gender, there could be growing opportunities there too. One more point, if I may, Phil. Asia's urbanizing. It's urbanizing fast, and so the whole urban agenda is big for us. And those with experience in cities, working in the developing world, whether it's Asia or elsewhere, there may well be more opportunities in that space as well.
You have an interesting vantage point as a Canadian inside the Asian Development Bank, and I imagine people look to you sometimes with the question, what is Canada's niche? What does Canada do really well? Do you have any sort of a sense of that? How, if you were doing an elevator pitch on what Canadian talent can offer to the developing world in Asia, what sectors come to mind? What areas of expertise come to mind for you?
Well, Canadians tend to be an international lot. You'll find them in many organizations abroad, international organizations and NGOs abroad. There seems to be a disproportionate share of Canadians who, by their nature, tend to look beyond the borders, and in a very multicultural international society, that comes naturally, I think, and with an extremely strong education base and top-notch universities that are attracting many students now from Asia. That's a solid base for expertise, and among the areas, and I wouldn't say these are the only ones. Engineers, you have top-notch schools for economics as well. We recruit specialists in areas like financial, various aspects of studying the finances around the project. I mentioned earlier clean tech. In the education space, again, technical vocational education and training, ADB is actually looking at the Canadian model and approach to education between secondary school and university, and respects that from an international standpoint as good practice and something that countries in Asia may wish to draw upon. These are just a few of the areas that I think Canada has particular strengths, not to mention as a country where commodity exports are particularly important, thinking of the prairie provinces and British Columbia. Knowledge of the agricultural space and rural development, these are areas that ADB continues to be involved in, and where Canadian experts may have a leg up.
Bart, thanks for this. Obviously the go-to place is the website.
Sure, so our Strategy 2030, the country partnership strategies, so looking at countries that might be of interest for a consultant. We have sector and thematic areas, so if one is a transport specialist, that there's a wealth of resources around transport. In addition to the country partnership strategy, there is, as I mentioned, the country operations business plan, which updates essentially the country strategy year by year. Within the part of the website focused on business opportunities, one can find specific notices for consultancies and procurement, where we are looking at, these are currently open opportunities for individuals and firms to apply for, as well as the winners of past contracts, which can be useful for identifying competition, but also potential partners to align with in the future.
Great. We'll include some of those links right underneath this presentation on the site, so people can go straight there.
Excellent.
And if they want to find you, they can find your address, coordinates on the website as well, obviously.
Quite easy to find, whether you don't even have to make it to the website. If you type in ADB, NARO, that's our North American Representative Office, ADB NARO, in Google or Yahoo, you'll come straight to our office, and we look forward to speaking with Canadian consultants, individual and firms, and seeing if we can't find more alignment and more opportunities to draw upon the tremendous expertise in Canada to help us assist countries in developing Asia.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bart.
Thank you.